It was almost real, the Pro Wrestling History Podcast, episode 130. Hello and welcome to this episode of It Was Almost Real, the Pro Wrestling History Podcast. My name is Ken Zimmerman Jr., and this is the podcast dedicated to the history of professional wrestling from the 1860s to 1940. And in this episode, I will discuss the match between James E. Owens, who had a claim to the American Collar and Elbow Wrestling Championship, and his first cousin, the powerful John McMahon. But first, I just wanted to give a couple quick updates, then we're going to jump into the main content. So the Pioneer Wrestlers book should be available in early May 2026. I set an ambitious goal for myself this year to publish 3 books in 2026. 2 will be on combat sports history, and the third one will be on St. Louis history. And right now I'm on pace, so hopefully I can continue to maintain that. This month we may have a bonus episode on the second Thursday in April. It just depends on if I can get it done in time. Originally, I was going to, after I had done the review of All Out 2021, AEW's highest drawing pay-per-view to this date, I was going to see what WWE counter-programmed with in September of 2021 with their premium live event. But I just don't have it in me to sit through a poor WWE card put together during Vince McMahon's dotage. You know, for somebody that was running around like a teenager popping back the pep pills and being a giant nuisance to most people and a horrible human being to one person in particular, you would have thought he would be too busy to put out these crappy wrestling shows, but he managed to do it. I'm going to go back and review a wrestling show that was historic, and that is WWF's WrestleMania 3 from 1987. It was significant not just for what it did for WWE, which made it a major player in the entertainment and the sports world, but the effect it had on other wrestlers and wrestling promoters. That event is what convinced Bill Watts to retire and sell Mid-South. That's what convinced Ted DiBiase to call Bill Watts and ask him for his release so he could go to work for the WWE, or well, WWF at the time. It was a very impactful event, both inside WWF and outside within the general wrestling world as well. So we'll we'll review that card and see if it lives up to the hype. And before I jump into the main content, there was one thing I saw this week and it's one of the things that drives me crazy about modern wrestling, and it is that everybody and their brother has to do the suicide or the tope suicida, which should be called the tope stupido, because somebody's going to get themselves killed doing this stupid move that every single human being, I think, that puts on a pair of wrestling boots now has to do. I've seen Roman Reigns do it and almost miss. I've seen Jey Uso do it and almost miss. I saw Javon Evans, who's very good at it, overshoot a guy, almost miss. I saw John Moxley, who's a very good wrestler, overshoot it and almost land on his head. And in the particular match I'm talking about, it was Megan Bayne and her partner Lena Cross versus Willow Nightingale and Harley Cameron. So they're having this match, and it's a rematch because Cross and Bayne have just defeated Nightingale and Cameron for the Women's Tag Team Championship. And at some point, Willow's standing out on the floor waiting to catch Megan Bayne, who takes a run and dives through those ropes and catches the tops of her boots. I don't know if the shoelaces caught on the ropes or what happened, but her feet dragged across that rope and it caught her momentum, and she's going head first down to the floor. And Willow reacts pretty quickly and tries to catch her, and I think got at least a hand or something on her to slow her up a little bit, because Megan Bain did not crash headfirst into the floor and kill herself, but boy, it was close. She didn't look dazed, but she got up for a second because she's embarrassed, for one. And she grabs Willow by the hair and is standing there looking in the camera with Willow, and then just shoves her away. So I couldn't tell if she had got dazed on that move or she was a little embarrassed by what happened and is trying to regain her heat. So the tope suicida is just one of these handful of moves that everybody does. It's extremely dangerous. There's not much reward for it. Nobody's going to get defeated by it. It's not a match-ending move, and it doesn't even look particularly devastating in comparison with some of the other things people do and kick out of. I just wish people would quit doing it. Even people that are really good high flyers and are skilled at it almost miss. It's a move that has a real high potential for error and injury, and the payoff is not that great. I think after the first 300 times the fans have seen somebody dive out through the ropes and land on somebody, it begins to lose its magic. And I'm glad Megan Bain was okay. She shouldn't even be leaving her feet that much if she can help it. She is so dominant and so big in comparison to most of the other performers. And I don't say big in a bad way. I mean big and as in a strong, powerful looking wrestler. She shouldn't be leaving her feet all that much. And she certainly shouldn't be diving outside the ring. But it's not just her that does it. Roman Reigns, the biggest star in wrestling, thinks he's got to go dive through the ropes. And I have seen Drew McIntyre do this tope suicida and then jump over the rope and land on people hoping that they can catch him. And that's a lot of wrestler to try to catch. I think I'd pass. And if I was one of the catchees, I would definitely be like, nah, I don't think so. All right. So enough of my ranting and raving about the tope suicida. So the main content for this week is based on the research that I'm doing on the Pioneer Wrestlers book. And it's because there was a couple of things that I didn't know. Well, there was a lot of things I didn't know before I started researching it. I was not even familiar with James Owens, and the reason is because James Owens tragically died at only 30 years of age. So he only had a few big matches that were naturally reported on before his untimely death on Christmas Eve, 1880, of all things. But James E. Owens was a very skilled Vermont collar and elbow professional wrestler. He was also first cousins with another very powerful collar and elbow professional wrestler by the name of John McMahon. The true legends of collar and elbow wrestling in the 1870s and 1880s. I'm going to throw Homer Lane in there because he was the first. He was quickly surpassed by the next three people I'm going to talk about, and that's J.H. McLaughlin, James Hiram McLaughlin, also known as Colonel McLaughlin, and Major McLaughlin. And all of the collar and elbow wrestlers in the Pioneer Wrestling book had their careers interrupted by the Civil War. So all of them had kind of a delayed entry into becoming nationally known professional wrestlers. And their careers really start taking off in the 1870s when they're already in their 30s. James E. Owens was a little bit younger than they were. So the Civil War did not interrupt his career. And he might have been the best when it was all said and done, except he got sick and he died. But James E. Owens was a little known wrestler in December of 1876 when he upsets Colonel J.H. McLaughlin in Detroit in a 2 out of 3 falls collar and elbow wrestling match that by everything I can see was a legitimate contest. In fact, the first two that we're going to talk, or the first three we're going to talk about that James E. Owens is having are all legitimate contests. He defeats McLaughlin, and so now he has a claim to the American Collar and Elbow Wrestling Championship. I use the terminology he has a claim on purpose because it isn't really a real belt, and they all claim it at different times for different reasons. So J.H. McLaughlin claimed it not because he defeated Homer Lane, who was the recognized collar and elbow champion of the 1860s, but because he won the Detroit tournament in 1870, and that's what put J.H. McLaughlin on the map. I'm sure he took a nap, but it put him on the map. It is also what propelled him into being a national wrestling star. Henry Moses Dufer is also developing quite a reputation as a collar and elbow wrestler in Massachusetts. Dufer is also originally a Vermonter. He is from Brattleboro, Vermont. Mann was born in Bakersfield and settled in Rutland. And then James E. Owens, I believe, is from around Rutland as well. I know the small town he lived in was in Rutland County. Dufer is a full-time tailor, part-time wrestler, and he has his tailor shop in Massachusetts, not Vermont. He moves to Massachusetts. Dufer secures a match with Owens based on his defeat of McLaughlin. Remember, we're talking claims because McLaughlin's still going to claim to be the champion as well. I think at one point in time in the 1870s, McLaughlin, Dufer, and McMahon were all claiming the title after various victories. Dufer challenges Owens, and they have a two-match series, a very controversial two-match series in Massachusetts during the early part of 1879. In February 1879, they wrestle a match in Worcester, Massachusetts. So Dufer has his tailor shop at nearby Marlborough, Massachusetts. He tends to wrestle a lot of his big matches in Boston, but the first match with Owens is in Worcester. And in Worcester, Owens and Dufer wrestle 4.5 hours in a very long, boring, inconclusive contest where the only fall was secured when Owens let go of Dufer's jacket. In collar and elbow wrestling, after you took your right hand and gripped the collar and your left hand and gripped the elbow, you could not release that grip unless the referee called for a break to give everybody a rest. If you release the grip during the throw, if you release the grip even after you thought you had scored the fall and the referee had not indicated it was a fall, you would lose that fall. It wasn't a penalty. You forfeited the fall if you lost your grip. So during that match, Owens lost his grip, giving Dufer the fall, but it was only one fall out of a best 2 out of 3 falls match. The referee initially was going to award the match to Dufer, but Owens and his seconds protested and said, no, you can't do that. He only won one fall, and after further consultation, they agreed that it would be a draw and that Dufer and Owens would wrestle again soon. And if you're thinking about it, yeah, that's what you would do if you were trying to work and get people to come back for extra shows, but I actually don't think that these were work series. On Wednesday, June 11th, 1879, Dufer wrestles a rematch with James Owens, and this time it's at the Howard Athenaeum in Boston, Massachusetts. So at the start of the first fall, Dufer makes a try at a throw with an inside knee lock, and Owens lands on his side, preventing the fall. Owens counters a couple times, and then Dufer lands. I'd say he throws Owens 3 more times, but every time he lands on his side. And you're hearing, okay, they're throwing each other. They are. They've thrown each other about 5 times in 40 minutes. This is not the most exciting thing you've ever seen. But finally, after 41 minutes, Dufer is able to throw Owens with a cross toe, and he throws him flat to his back for the first fall. The controversy in this match came during the second fall, which Owens wrestled pretty defensively in, and Dufer is trying for trips and hip locks. After about 30 minutes, Dufer is able to throw Owens to the mat, and he lands on his side with, I think it was 2 points down, not three. And remember, in collar and elbow wrestling, it has to be a clean back fall. You have to throw them cleanly onto their back. You cannot land them on their side and roll them into a pin like you would in Greco-Roman wrestling or catch-as-catch-can wrestling. But because the referee was a little out of position, and when Owens landed, Doofer had followed him all the way to the mat and pressed his chest to Owens' chest and pushed him flat on the ground. The referee sees him flat on the ground and declares the fall for Doofer. Owens and his second are furious and say, no, 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 no. He landed me on my side and rolled me onto my back. And the referee said, that's not how I saw it. I saw you flat on your back after the process of a throw. The referee was just out of position. It wasn't funny business. The referee awards the match to Doofer, but Owens protests to the stakeholder and says, I don't think he should get the purse, and I want to protest this and have the purse held up, which the stakeholder did, with the thought that Owens and Doofer would wrestle a third match, and then it would just be for the stake money plus anything else they added to it. But Owens had other plans. After this second match with Doofer, I think Owens knew that he probably wasn't going to be able to beat Doofer. Owens is 5'10", 5'11", and weighs about 160 pounds. Doofer is 5'8" and weighs about 175 pounds. So Owens decides, I don't know that I can beat this guy, so I'm just going to drop this to my cousin in a work match and let my cousin deal with him. Because John McMahon, Owens' cousin, is 5'11", 197 pounds, which is a monster of a man for the 1880s. They get with Harry Hill, the famous collar and elbow wrestling promoter in New York City, and they arrange a match at Harry Hill's, or no, it wasn't Harry Hill's establishment. It was a local theater, the St. James Theater. And they set this match up for August 6th, 1879. So 2 months after Owens wrestled Doofer in Boston. And this match was supposedly for a $2,000 side bet in the Championship of America. Now, the 2000 side bet is a complete fiction. These two were working this match, and they would split any gambling winnings they got off of the match, and they would also split their part of the gate. So when you had matches where they were working, the side bet was always pretty much a fiction. They would provide the money to someone, but then they would divide it when they got it back. And if they didn't want to let the stakeholder in on what they were doing, the stakeholder would pay it to whoever won the match, and then they would divide up the money. Owen and McMahon come to grips and immediately start trying to trip each other in this match. But Owens starts complaining to the referee, who breaks them so they can release their grips. And Owens says, this jacket is way too big that McMahon's wearing. Again, they're wanting to fool people. While it's well known that they were cousins in Vermont, a lot of people outside of Vermont did not know that McMahon and Owens were related to each other. And they're trying to make the crowd think that, yeah, we're really wrestling for real, because they're trying to dupe the gamblers so they can make a big bunch of money with the gambling proceeds, as well as any gate receipts. Hill, after a consultation with the seconds, agrees and says McMahon has to put on a smaller jacket. Already, this match is more interesting than the two matches Owens had with Doofer, and it shows why professional wrestling became a work, because if it was always contest, it was going to be for a very small audience. After McMahon changes into a smaller jacket, they get their grips back and continue the match. Owen throws McMahon with a trip lock and foot twist to take the first fall in 16 minutes, 15 seconds. They tie up for the second fall after the intermission, and we have an accident. So if you watch professional wrestling today, you know accidents are not uncommon. And here you have a work match in collar and elbow wrestling in the 19th century, and we're going to have a mistake and an injury here. Because to start the second fall, McMahon has an early version of what in judo we would call the drop knee shoulder throw. And it's kind of unique in collar and elbow wrestling because I've never read about anybody else doing it. And the first time that he did it was in a contest with, might have been J.H. McLaughlin, but whoever he did it to the first time was completely surprised when he did this. And it was very effective. And the drop knee shoulder throw is very effective. And you can do it with by keeping your grips. You just twist into the jacket. In judo, we put the elbow of the right arm underneath the right armpit of the person we're trying to throw. Their chest is against your back, and then you drop to one knee and just pull them right over. And McMahon had mastered a version of this in collar and elbow wrestling. And he throws Owen over his shoulder, and Owens is well aware that his cousin does this throw, but something goes wrong, and instead of coming down on his side or his back, Owens comes down face first. And the throw knocks him senseless, and he's got a cut over his right eye. Hill pauses the match for 5 minutes so they can clean up Owens. And Owens does not appear the same after the mishap, probably because he had a concussion. Gamblers offered odds of 2-1 on McMahon winning, but no one took the bets at this point. McMahon goes in, throws Owens with a left hip lock and right arm ring to take the second fall. They're wanting to get Owens a chance to recover right away. After the intermission, they come back. McMahon sees that his cousin's still woozy, so he starts throwing him gently onto his side, taking up time because each time they land on the side, Hill waves the fall off, then they release their grips, then they stand back up, then they retake their grips, and McMahon is doing this on purpose to try to give his cousin a chance to recover from this accidental mishap that they've had. Finally, McMahon uses a left trip to take the third fall in the match at 18 minutes and 5 seconds. From this point on, McMahon will claim the American Collar and Elbow Wrestling Championship. Because James Owens is so much younger than Duffer and McLaughlin and John McMahon, there is a chance that he would have become the American Collar and Elbow Wrestling Champion again as McLaughlin, Duffer, and McMahon aged out of the sport. However, when he was doing a wrestling tour in Ohio in October of 1880, he got very ill. Could have been the flu. His sister came from Vermont and she nursed him for 2 weeks at the end of October. And he was well enough by the middle of November to travel back to Vermont. And they thought, young, strong, professional wrestler, 31 years of age, they thought he would recover fully. And it looked like he was going to recover fully. And then 3 days before Christmas in 1880, he came down with pneumonia. James Owens passed away on Christmas Eve, 1880. McMahon, Duffer, and McLaughlin would continue to claim the title, that they would have matches with each other. Some were contests. Towards the end of their careers, they would also work matches. For the recommendations this week, I wanted to recommend the Wrestling Observer Yearbook from 1984. It's covering the first year of the wrestling war where Vince McMahon starts invading all the territories. It also cleared up a misconception I had that I'm going to correct now, or that I'm going to correct during the review, about Kerry Von Erich's title reign in 1984. But before that, I wanted to also recommend some of the AEW wrestling matches I've been watching on their pay-per-view library on HBO Max. And these three of the first ones I'm going to recommend are all the main events from the last two pay-per-views of 2021 and the first pay-per-view of 2022, and that is Kenny Omega wrestling Adam Page, and then Adam Page defending the AEW World Championship for the first time against Adam Cole, and then the match where CM Punk took the title from Adam Page in the following pay-per-view. So those were the main events for those three pay-per-views in a row. I also have to say I really enjoyed the Claudio Castagnoli versus Zack Sabre Jr. match from Forbidden Door 2022. That's Claudio's first match in AEW. And before I get into the review, I really enjoyed the AEW shows starting in January until the this last pay-per-view. And on that last pay-per-view, they had one of the most terrific matches I have ever seen between Adam Page and MJF. This is the kind of match. So the Sheik used to be known for that kind of bloody, hardcore, extreme match. And there was a television executive in Ohio that used to keep a video of one of the Sheik's matches in his office. And when anybody tried to come in and sell him on professional wrestling, he would pull that video out and say, "This is why professional wrestling is never going to be on my television station." It turns off most people. There is a segment of the AEW wrestling base that will like that match, but the vast majority of people, any lapsed wrestling fans, any casual fans that you should all be trying to attract to grow your promotion, are going to be turned off by that kind of a match. I think it was a big mistake with all the momentum they had been building and all the positive feedback and reviews they had been getting before that. And then the next four shows, the next two Dynamites and the next two Collisions, were some of the worst shows I have seen on AEW. I still find at least one good wrestling match in every show, and there's still things to like on every show. But I'm starting to be able to watch the AEW program like I used to watch WWE. I can watch a 2 hour program in about 30 minutes or less because I just skip through the stuff I have no interest in, which is getting to be most of the show. WWE, they have most of their matches are not worth watching. Every once in a while, you'll see one that'll jump out at you, but their promos and their segments are so much better. The AEW segments and promos most of the time take away from the match. They don't sell you on the match. The wrestling itself sells you on the product. If you listen to them talk about it, you'd never watch their show. I hope that Tony Khan can do a course correction and get back to what they were doing at the beginning of the year because I really thought they were on to something there, particularly at a time when WWE is not knocking anybody's socks off. One of the things I wanted to correct in the review, and the review for this week is the Championship Wrestling from Florida show on May 16th, 1984. And this is right after Kerry Von Erich had won the world title from Ric Flair in Texas Stadium, and before he dropped the title back to him in Japan, like 10 days later. Because whenever Ric Flair is talking, now when Hulk Hogan talked about stuff going on in wrestling, you don't believe anything he says about anything. But when Ric Flair would get on the interviews, I know he's lost his mind in the last 5 or 6 years, but when he was still sharp and when he was still giving interviews to podcasts and different things, doing his own podcast, when he would talk about things, they usually were true. So if he says he took a swing at Eric Bischoff at catering, there are plenty of witnesses that say he took a swing at Eric Bischoff and catering. When he tells a story about Harley going with him to Japan, Harley says, "Yeah, that's exactly what happened." So most of his interviews, the stuff he had said was truthful. And this, I don't think he was doing it to besmirch Kerry, and I don't think he had said this to for any other reason than he was confused. And he thought that's what was supposed to happen, but it's not what occurred. And reading the Wrestling Observer from 1984 really helped clear this up for me. But Rick had always said that Kerry was supposed to hold the NWA World title for a couple of months, but then he no-showed a couple of events, pissed the NWA promoters off, and they sent Rick to Japan to take the title off Kerry right away. The problem with that is Rick was also booked on that tour with Kerry. Kerry only wrestled a few places in between Dallas and Japan, and he made all those dates. You read the Wrestling Observer and documents where Kerry was going before he got to Japan. He didn't miss any of those dates. And in this episode of Championship Wrestling from Florida, which I do have to apologize, it's on YouTube. As usual, all the links can be found at kenzermanjr.com/episode 130. The Kerry is on there with the world title, and he's promoting a match with Ron Bass, and it's as clear as I've ever seen Kerry give an interview. He spoke very well when he was at the commentary desk. He's wearing a suit. He represented the NWA very well. I think he took this really seriously. And I believe Rick, because Kerry's substance abuse problems are very well documented. And Kerry was not known for being the most dependable wrestler, even during his heyday. So when Rick said, yeah, he was supposed to be the champion for a couple of months, but he no-showed a couple of shows, I could believe that happened, and that made sense to me. NWA didn't usually put the title on people for a week or a week and a half. We talked about fluke champions in the last episode, but actually they did intend to take the belt off Kerry then, because they had that show coming up at the Meadowlands, and Rick was booked in the main event for that show, and they wanted Rick to have the world title for that show. Had that not been the case, maybe Kerry would have carried it for a few months. But they wanted Rick to have the title back, and Kerry didn't no-show. He made all the dates he was supposed to make, and it sounded like there was not any issues with any of the matches. Kerry versus Rick was the most sought-after match in most of the NWA territories outside of Crockett from 1984 through 1985. St. Louis was really down at that point in time, but if you had Kerry versus Rick in the main event, you could pull in a full house. My sister and I went back to the matches for the first time in like a year and a half when Kerry versus Rick was the main event right after Kerry had won the title. That Texas Stadium show was originally to have been the world title switch between David Von Erich and Ric Flair. And David probably would have carried it, even with that Meadowlands show in New York, probably would have carried the title all the way to Starrcade, where he would have lost it back to Rick. They would have just had David and Rick main event that show in New York. They were not going to, well, I guess technically Meadowlands is New Jersey. I don't want anybody getting hate mail for me. I don't think you're all the same thing. But you're going to be in the New York area. So that New York area show, I could see them going, yeah, we'll go with David and Rick because they want to build that match if that's going to be the Starrcade match. But they were not going to bring Kerry in for Starrcade. Kerry versus Rick is not what they wanted on the top of that New York area card, even though Kerry had just beaten Rick for the world title. So I have to apologize to Kerry for inadvertently besmirching him and saying he no-showed matches while he was the world champion. So the show opens up with Kerry sitting at the announce desk talking with the announcers. Southern champion Ron Bass comes out to wrestle Denny Brown, who's being billed as Dennis Brown. And Denny Brown would become the NWA Junior Heavyweight Champion in the future. But Kerry's in a suit, spoke real well during the match, and Bass wins a quick victory. And as soon as Bass wins the match, he comes out and confronts Kerry at the desk. And Kerry stands up, starts to take his jacket off, says, "Don't let this jacket stop you, big boy." Because Bass is talking about coming over the desk and beating up Kerry. One man gang who is injured and is managing people as Panama Gang separates them and leads Bass back from ringside. As soon as One Man Gang's leg healed, he went back in the ring as One Man Gang. But this was something they did with him in Florida for a few months just to give his leg a chance to heal. So the second segment is a recap of Kevin Sullivan attacking Dusty Rhodes with the Golden Spike, but he hits Blackjack Mulligan instead of Dusty. He's coming at Dusty. Blackjack Mulligan knocks Dusty out of the way and gets hit with the spike himself. The third match, or actually the third segment, starts with the returning Sir Oliver Humperdinck commenting on Superstar Billy Graham's arm wrestling match with Denny Brown. And Billy Jack, who's in Florida at the time, interrupts the arm wrestling match and tells Graham he wants to arm wrestle him. And Graham says, no, 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 no. This man has a contract. This man has a contract. Dennis Brown gets the opportunity. So Billy Jack storms off, and Sir Oliver Humperdinck is talking about what a rude individual he is, kind of forecasting the fact that Oliver Humperdinck is coming back to manage most of the heels in Florida. Billy Graham at the time is still the karate version of Billy Graham, so he hasn't reverted back to the tie-dye yet. He's still wearing the karate pants. And Billy Graham, after he beats Denny Brown in the arm wrestling, he goes and he wins the squash match as well. The fourth segment is a returning Mike Rotunda giving an interview at the commentary desk while Black Bart wrestles Mike Fever. And after Bart beats Fever, he starts beating him up along with his manager, Panama Gang. And Ron Bass runs in there to join him. So Mike Rotunda jumps up from the commentary desk and stops them beating up the enhancement talent. And they all turn on Rotunda. So Barry Windham comes running out, jumps in the ring to save Rotunda. And the team brawl outside the ring. And we're setting up the formation of the tag team of Mike Rotunda and Barry Windham, who will soon be brother-in-laws in the future. Mike Rotunda would marry Barry Windham's sister. And they are going to have a run in the WWF with the tag team championship in the next year. The fifth segment is Billy Jack versus Mr. Olympia, not Jerry Stubbs, but some nondescript putz in a mask. After Billy Jack defeats Olympia quickly, Billy Jack walks over to the commentary desk and delivers a promo. With that look and the fact that he could speak a little and he wasn't bad in the ring, if he didn't have such significant mental health challenges, Billy Jack could have been a huge, huge star in professional wrestling. Everybody was enamored by the look. Vince gave him a run just based on the look. Obviously, he has significant mental health challenges borne out by the fact that he's sitting in a prison, or not a prison, he's sitting in a jail in Oregon, charged with murdering his wife. Although he'll probably be put into some kind of mental health facility because he's probably not competent to stand trial. And then the final segment was before the final segment, we had the Take 5 with Barbara Clary segment, and she was talking about the Lord of the Rings at the Orange Bowl on June 30th, 1984. And that was Eddie Graham's response to Vince McMahon Jr. invading Florida. Until Vince Sr. died, Vince didn't mess around with Florida too much because Eddie Graham and Vince Sr. had a relationship. But once Vince Sr. died, then all bets were off. And then the last segment is Chief Joe Lightfoot and Mike Davis versus Hector Guerrero and Malachi, who are part of Kevin Sullivan's Army of Darkness. And Malachi was not Bob Roop. That was Gene Lewis, the kayfabe brother of Dale Lewis. Gene Lewis was a big star in the Central States, and I saw him early on in some of the first wrestling that I watched in St. Louis because he was here 80-81. The Army of Darkness, of course, wins the match to close the show. I've talked about the WrestleMania review. I'll be looking for another classic card from the 80s to review for the next regular show that'll come out on a Monday. I think that's going to be it for this episode of It Was Almost Real, the Pro Wrestling History Podcast. You can check out the show notes for this podcast at kenzermanjr.com/episode 130. KenzermanJr.com is my website, and it's the place to see all the things I'm working on. If you have already rated the podcast where you listen to it, I thank you greatly. If you have not, I'd ask that you rate it wherever you listen to the show, as that helps keep the show visible and help people who have never found it discover it. If you would like to ask me a question, pass along a comment, my email is ken@kenzimmermanjr.com. I love to hear from the listeners. So until next time, everybody, take care. Bye bye.